High Commander Vektash stood on the command bridge of the Eternal Triumph, his four eyes scanning the holographic projection that dominated the center of the vast chamber. The galaxy sprawled before him in miniature, half of it bathed in the crimson light that marked Korthan territory. 10,000 years of unbroken conquest glowed in that red tide, a testament to the superiority of his people. He was proud, as any Korthan warrior had the right to be. The Dominion had never lost a war. Not one. Not in 10 millennia of expansion across the stars. Other species fought with passion or desperation, but the Korthans fought with the cold certainty of mathematics. Superior technology, superior tactics, superior will. Every confrontation ended the same way, surrender or annihilation. Today, he would add another star system to that crimson map. Sub-Commander Raylath approached, her movements precise and military. She carried a data tablet, which she offered to Vektash with the proper salute. High Commander, the intelligence report on the human species is complete. Vektash took the tablet, his primary eyes scanning the contents while his secondary eyes remained fixed on the galactic display. Humans, a young species from a world they called Earth, located in what they designated the Sol system. They'd achieved faster-than-light travel only 300 years ago, a mere eye blink in galactic terms. They'd established colonies on 47 worlds, none of them particularly strategic or resource-rich. Military capability, Vektash asked. Minimal, Raylath replied. They maintain a defense fleet of approximately 12,000 vessels. No major military victories against peer opponents. Their largest conflict was a civil war 2 centuries ago. They've fought minor skirmishes with pirates and one brief territorial dispute with the Zelnak Collective, which ended in negotiated settlement. Vektash felt a twinge of disappointment. There would be no honor in this conquest. The humans occupied space the Dominion had marked for expansion, but they would pose no real challenge. He almost considered reassigning the task to a lesser commander, but protocol demanded that first contact with a new species be handled at the highest level. Prepare the standard ultimatum, he ordered. Within the hour, the message was transmitted across all human communication channels. Vektash himself delivered it, as tradition demanded. His image would appear on every human screen, in every human habitat, on every human world. I am High Commander Vektash of the Korthan Dominion. Your species occupies territory marked for incorporation into our empire. You will surrender unconditionally within 1 solar cycle, as measured by your home world. Comply, and you will be absorbed into the Dominion with minimal bloodshed. Your species will serve and in service find purpose. Refuse and you will be annihilated. This is not a negotiation. This is inevitability. You have 1 year. He expected immediate chaos. Most species responded to the ultimatum with panic, infighting, or desperate diplomatic overtures. Some attacked immediately in futile displays of defiance. A few simply collapsed into despair. The human response arrived within 6 hours. High Commander Vektash, this is Secretary General Adamako of the Terran Union. We have received your ultimatum. We request negotiations to discuss terms and explore peaceful alternatives. Vektash felt a surge of insult. Negotiations were for equals. The Korthan Dominion did not negotiate with species marked for conquest. He composed his response carefully, keeping his anger controlled. There will be no negotiations. You are not our equals. You have 1 year. Use it to prepare your people for what comes next. The second human response came even faster. Understood, High Commander. We will have our answer ready in 1 year. Vektash studied the message, searching for hidden meanings. The tone was strange, not defiant, not desperate, but almost businesslike, as if the humans were acknowledging a deadline for a project rather than facing the end of their independence. He dismissed the oddity. Every species reacted differently to their impending conquest. The humans would come to understand their situation soon enough. Maintain surveillance, he ordered Raylath. Standard protocols. I want to know if they attempt to flee or build weapons. For the first 2 months, the intelligence reports seemed routine. Human civilian leadership held emergency sessions. Their military began mobilization procedures, standard behavior for a species facing conquest. But then the reports began to include details that Vektash found unusual. Construction projects, massive ones, simultaneous across all human worlds. They're building shipyards, Rayleigh reported during the 8th-week briefing. 40 new orbital construction facilities in the Sol system alone, similar projects on every major colony. Fortifications, Vektash suggested. Unknown, High Commander. The construction is still in early stages, but their industrial output has increased by 40%. Vektash considered this. Most species facing conquest either prepared their militaries with what they had or descended into chaos. Humans seemed to be doing neither. They were building. He felt a whisper of curiosity but dismissed it. Whatever they were constructing, it wouldn't be enough. By month 3, the whisper of curiosity had grown into a persistent itch of concern. Industrial output has tripled, Rayleigh announced, her voice carrying an edge Vektash had never heard from her before. Uncertainty. High Commander, they've mobilized their entire civilization. Every human world is operating on emergency production schedules. Vektash pulled up the data himself. The numbers were staggering. Humans had converted civilian industries to military manufacturing. Asteroid mining operations had increased by 400%. Power generation facilities were being constructed at an unprecedented rate. Educational institutions had shifted to accelerated engineering programs. He compared the data to historical records of other species facing conquest. The pattern was all wrong. Species in despair showed declining activity, reduced production, population flight, social collapse. Species preparing for desperate last stands showed militarization but focused on training and fortification. Humans were doing something else entirely. They were building as if they had a goal, a plan, a timeline they intended to meet. What are they constructing? Vektash demanded. Rayleigh manipulated the holographic display, bringing up reconnaissance images. Warships, High Commander, they're building warships. Vektash examined the designs. They were crude compared to Korthan engineering, blocky, inelegant, clearly designed for rapid construction rather than optimal performance. But there were a lot of them. The shipyards were launching new vessels every day. How many? Current count is 2,347, Rayleigh said. But High Commander, they're not slowing down. They're accelerating. Production rates are increasing each week. Vektash forced himself to remain calm. 2,000 ships were nothing against the Korthan armada. Even 10,000 would be insufficient. The humans were panicking, building whatever they could as fast as possible. Quantity over quality, the last desperate gamble of species that knew they were doomed. Maintain surveillance, he ordered again. And begin preliminary fleet assembly. We'll crush their hastily built fleet and accept their surrender. But the reports continued to disturb him. By month 5, human ship production had reached 5,000 vessels. By month 6, 8,000. The acceleration wasn't linear, it was exponential. Every new shipyard increased their capacity to build more shipyards. Every new power plant enabled more factories. Every trained engineer trained more engineers. Vektash began researching human history in detail, something he'd never bothered to do with previous conquest targets. What he found unsettled him. Humans had a concept they called total war, the complete mobilization of an entire society toward a single objective. They'd done it multiple times in their own history, fighting themselves with an intensity that shocked him. During something they called the Second World War, they transformed entire economies in months, turning automobile factories into tank foundries, civilian populations into military industrial workers. They'd done it again during what they called the climate crisis, mobilizing globally to rebuild their entire energy infrastructure in decades. They'd done it during their space race, going from primitive rockets to landing on their own moon in less than a decade, driven by competition and deadlines. Humans, Vektash realized with growing unease, were a species of builders and problem solvers. And he had given them the ultimate problem, survive or die. And he had given them a deadline. Sub-Commander, he said during the month 7 briefing, I need detailed analysis on human psychology, specifically their response to deadlines and challenges. Rayleigh returned 2 days later with a report that made Vektash's blood run cold. High Commander, Humans have a psychological trait their researchers call deadline motivation. They perform optimally when given clear goals and time constraints. Their history shows repeated instances of impossible tasks completed when faced with deadlines. They call these Manhattan Project moments, after an instance where they developed a weapon of mass destruction in under 3 years, a task their own scientists thought would take decades. She paused, her secondary eyes meeting his. High Commander, we didn't threaten them. We gave them a project with a deadline. Vektash stood frozen, his mind racing through the implications. The ultimatum was meant to give them time to accept their fate, to understand the futility of resistance. Instead, he'd given them a goal and a timeline, and they were treating it like a challenge to be met. The surveillance reports from Month 8 confirmed his fears. A Korthan intelligence agent had managed to infiltrate a human industrial world. His report was brief and deeply troubling. They're not afraid. They're excited. Countdown clocks are everywhere, in public spaces, on screens, in factories. They display the time remaining until the deadline, but they're not counting down to their doom. They're counting down to their delivery date. They're treating this like a competition. Workers are volunteering for triple shifts. Engineers are sleeping in the factories. I've never seen a species so unified, so focused. It's as if the entire human civilization has become a single organism with one purpose: meet the deadline. Vektash called an emergency strategy session with his senior commanders. He displayed the production data, the psychological profiles, the historical analysis. The humans will have approximately 38,000 ships by the deadline, he announced. This is significantly more than any species has ever fielded against us in initial contact. His commanders stirred, but none showed real concern. The Korthan Armada numbered 50,000 ships, accumulated over centuries. Quality aside, they still had numerical superiority. However, Vektash continued, we must consider the possibility that human production may exceed projections. I'm ordering full fleet mobilization. Every available ship from every sector. We will assemble the largest armada in Korthan history. Over the next 2 months, Korthan ships converged from across their empire. 50,000 warships, including the Eternal Triumph, the largest, most powerful warship ever constructed by any species. It was a show of force that had never failed to break enemy morale, but the intelligence reports continued to worsen. By month 10, human ship production had reached 45,000. By month 11, 53,000. They'd matched the Korthan Armada and they were still building. Raylath presented the final pre-battle analysis with visible apprehension. High Commander, human fleet strength at the deadline is now estimated at 68,000 warships. They've exceeded projections by 78%. Vektash studied the numbers, his minds working through tactical scenarios. Quantity versus quality. The human ships were inferior, that much was certain. Korthan vessels were technological marvels, each one crafted over months or years by master shipwrights. Human ships were assembled in weeks, mass-produced on assembly lines like industrial products, but there were so many of them. We'll overwhelm them with superior firepower and tactics, Vektash declared, more to reassure himself than his officers. We have 10,000 years of military experience. They're playing at war with hastily built ships and no real combat doctrine. We will prevail. He had to prevail. The Korthan Dominion had never withdrawn an ultimatum. To do so would shatter the myth of Korthan invincibility, the foundation of their entire empire. Species obeyed because they believed resistance was futile. If humans could defy the Dominion and survive, others would follow. No, there was no choice now. The humans would be crushed, no matter the cost. The Korthan Armada arrived at the edge of human space exactly 1 year after the ultimatum was delivered. 50,000 warships in perfect formation, a wall of steel and fire that stretched across the void. Vektash stood on the bridge of the Eternal Triumph and broadcast his final message. Humans of Earth, your deadline has expired. Surrender now and you will be incorporated into the Dominion. Resist and you will be annihilated. You have 1 hour to respond. The response came in 30 minutes. A human face appeared on the view screen, an older woman in a military uniform, her hair gray, her eyes hard. High Commander Vektash, I am Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We have prepared our answer as promised. We decline your offer. Leave our space immediately or we will remove you by force. Vektash felt rage surge through him, the audacity, the disrespect. These primitives dared to threaten him. You have made your choice, he said coldly. May your species forgive you for what comes next. He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. All ships advance, standard conquest formation, overwhelm and destroy. The Korthan armada moved forward, a crimson tide of destruction that had broken every enemy for 10 millennia. Vektash felt the old confidence returning. This was what the Korthan Dominion did. They conquered. It was inevitable as gravity. The human fleet emerged from concealment. They came from behind Earth's moon, from orbital stations, from asteroid bases throughout the Sol system. They came in waves, in formations, in numbers that made Vektash's breath catch. Sensor reading, Raylath said, her voice tight. 72,000 ships. High Commander. That's not 68,000. Where did the additional 4,000 come from? Vektash understood immediately. The humans hadn't stopped building when they reached their estimate. They'd continued production up until the last possible moment. They'd exceeded their own projections. They delivered ahead of schedule. All ships maintain formation, he ordered, forcing calm into his voice. Prepare to engage. The battle began. Immediately, Vektash realized something was wrong. The human ships were inferior individually, that much was true. Korthan ships had better shields, better weapons, better armor. In a one-on-one engagement, a Korthan vessel would win every time, but the humans weren't fighting one-on-one. They attacked in groups, 5 or 6 human ships focusing on a single Korthan vessel. They came from multiple vectors simultaneously, overwhelming shields through concentrated fire. When a Korthan ship destroyed one attacker, 3 more took its place. They're using pack tactics, Raylath observed, pulling up tactical analysis. Coordinated assault patterns. Each group operates semi-autonomously but maintains communication with adjacent groups. It's like watching predators hunt. Vektash watched his tactical display with growing horror. The Korthan formation, which had broken every enemy for millennia, was being torn apart. Human ships darted in and out, striking and withdrawing, never presenting static targets. They fought without honor, without glory. They fought to win. A Korthan destroyer exploded on his view screen, overwhelmed by 8 human frigates. Then another. Then a cruiser. Damage report, Vektash demanded. We've lost 600 ships, the tactical officer reported. Human losses are approximately 2,000, but they're replacing destroyed units with reserves. High Commander, they have more ships than our initial count. They're still bringing reinforcements into the battle. Vektash's minds raced. The humans had hidden ships, kept reserves, deceived his intelligence. They'd built even more than projected, and they'd concealed their true numbers until the battle was joined. He pulled up historical human combat data, something he should have studied more carefully. Humans had a military concept they called deception, hiding true strength, misdirecting enemy attention, revealing capabilities only when it created maximum advantage. They'd used it against each other for millennia. Now they were using it against him. Focus fire on their command ships, Vektash ordered. Break their coordination. But there were no command ships. The human fleet operated with distributed command, each group capable of independent action. Destroying one commander changed nothing. The rest continued fighting. More Korthan ships died. 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. Vektash watched the battle evolve with the detached horror of a scientist observing a failed experiment. Every Korthan tactical doctrine was being countered. The humans had studied 10,000 years of Korthan military history, and they designed specific responses to every strategy. When Korthan ships formed defensive clusters, humans deployed drone ships, cheap, expendable vessels packed with explosives that overwhelmed point defenses through sheer numbers. When Korthan vessels attempted to establish fire superiority through concentrated broadsides, human ships scattered and reformed, never giving them a static target. When damaged Korthan ships attempted to withdraw, human vessels pursued relentlessly, finishing wounded prey before they could escape. They're hunting us, Raylath said quietly. High Commander, this isn't a battle, it's a hunt. Vektash accessed human evolutionary data, something he'd only glanced at before. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters. They'd chased prey across vast distances, running animals to exhaustion. They didn't win through strength or speed. They won through endurance, adaptability, and overwhelming numbers. They were hunting the Korthan armada the way their ancestors had hunted mammals across Earth's plains. A proximity alarm shrieked. Vektash looked at his tactical display and saw dozens of human ships converging on the Eternal Triumph. Hundreds more were moving to support them. "They're targeting the flagship," the tactical officer said unnecessarily. Vektash understood their strategy immediately. Destroy the Eternal Triumph, and the psychological impact on the Korthan fleet would be devastating. The flagship had never been destroyed in battle. It was a symbol of Korthan invincibility. "All nearby ships, defensive formation around the Eternal Triumph," he ordered. "Concentrate fire on attacking vessels." But the human ships kept coming. They accepted losses that no Korthan commander would tolerate, trading 3 ships for 1, 5 for 1, grinding down the defensive screen through sheer attrition. Vektash watched a human cruiser, already crippled and burning, accelerate directly into a Korthan destroyer. Both ships vanished in a fireball. "They're using ramming attacks," Raylath said, disbelief in her voice. "They're sacrificing ships deliberately." Vektash felt something he hadn't experienced in his entire military career: fear. The humans weren't just willing to die for victory. They were weaponizing their own deaths, turning every destroyed ship into a tactical advantage. The Eternal Triumph shuddered as human fire breached the outer shields. Damage reports flooded in. The humans weren't trying to destroy the flagship, they were trying to disable it, to capture it. They wanted the symbol of Korthan power intact, to parade as a trophy. "Full retreat," Vektash ordered, the words like poison in his mouth. "All ships withdraw to rally point Theta-9. Fighting withdrawal, maintain formation integrity." The Korthan armada began to pull back, a maneuver it hadn't performed in living memory. Vektash watched his fleet retreat in good order, professional even in withdrawal, but retreat nonetheless. The humans didn't pursue. They held position at the edge of their territory, a wall of ships defending their home. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the viewscreen once more. "You came to conquer us, High Commander. We only wanted to be left alone. Return and we'll finish what you started." The transmission ended. Vektash stood in silence, staring at the tactical display. He'd lost 15,000 ships, the greatest single battle loss in Korthan history. The humans had lost perhaps 30,000, but they had ships to spare, and they were still building. The journey back to Korthan High Command took 3 weeks. Vektash spent every moment of it analyzing the battle, preparing his report, understanding the magnitude of his failure. The Dominion Council convened in the Hall of Conquest, surrounded by monuments to 10,000 years of victory. Vektash stood before them, the weight of defeat pressing down on him like a physical force. "High Commander Vektash," the Prime Counselor began, her voice cold. "You were tasked with the conquest of a primitive species. You returned with the greatest military loss in Korthan history. Explain." Vektash had prepared for this moment. He activated the holographic display and showed them everything: the production data, the psychological profiles, the battle analysis. "We did not lose because the humans were stronger," he said. "We lost because we made a fundamental error in understanding their nature. We gave them exactly what their psychology is optimized for: a clear goal, a defined timeline, and a reason to unite." He showed them human propaganda from the year of preparation. Posters declaring 1 year to freedom were displayed in every human city. Countdown clocks had turned the deadline into a shared objective. Production quotas had been gamified, with factories competing to exceed targets. The entire human species had transformed their survival into a project with measurable milestones and a delivery date. "Humans are builders and problem solvers," Vektash continued. "We presented them with a problem: build a fleet capable of defeating the greatest military in the galaxy. We gave them a deadline, 1 year. They solved the problem. They met the deadline. They exceeded specifications." He pulled up comparative industrial data. "In 1 year, humanity matched our industrial capacity that took us millennia to build. They didn't do it through superior technology. They did it through complete societal mobilization, voluntary cooperation, and what they called deadline motivation. They turned their entire civilization into a single project team with one objective. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Vektash pressed on. We can conquer species that accept conquest. We can defeat species that fight with courage or desperation. But we cannot conquer a species that treats war like a project deadline and delivers ahead of schedule. If we give them 5 years to prepare, they won't just defend themselves. They'll build a fleet that dwarfs ours. If we give them 10 years, they'll come for us. Silence filled the hall of conquest. Finally, the Prime Counselor spoke. You recommend we abandon the conquest. I recommend we leave humanity alone, Vektash said carefully. We've never withdrawn an ultimatum before, but we've also never faced a species like this. They didn't want war. We forced it upon them. And they responded by becoming exactly what they needed to be to survive. He displayed one final image, the human fleet, still growing, still building even after the battle was won. They're not stopping, counselors. They had 1 year to prepare for war. Now they have all the time in the world to ensure no one threatens them again. The council debated for hours. Some argued for renewed assault, for vengeance, for maintaining the myth of invincibility at any cost. Others argued for pragmatism, for preserving their forces, for focusing on softer targets. In the end, pragmatism won. The Korthan Dominion would leave humanity alone. They would classify the Sol system as restricted space. They would tell themselves it was a tactical withdrawal, a strategic decision, not a defeat. But Vektash knew the truth. The Korthan Dominion had finally met a species it couldn't conquer. Not because humans were stronger warriors or better tacticians, but because they were builders who treated deadlines as challenges to exceed. 6 months after the battle, Vektash received a report from the Intelligence Division. Human ship production had reached 120,000 vessels. Their industrial capacity continued to grow exponentially. They'd begun establishing defensive stations throughout their territory, fortifying every approach, building redundant supply chains and communication networks. They'd also begun broadcasting a message on all galactic communication channels. Vektash listened to it alone in his quarters, Admiral Chen's voice echoing in the darkness. To any species considering what the Korthans attempted, we are engineers, builders, and problem solvers. We wanted to explore, create, and discover. You tried to give us a different problem to solve. We solved it in under a year. Please don't give us another one. Vektash understood the message's true meaning. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Humanity had demonstrated their capability. They could mobilize their entire civilization toward a single goal and achieve the impossible on deadline. They'd done it once. They could do it again. And next time they might not stop at defense. Vektash updated the Korthan military database, adding a new entry to the species classification system. Under humanity's Sol system, he wrote a single warning that would be read by every Korthan commander for generations to come. Do not give them a deadline. Do not give them a goal. Do not unite them against you. Humans are builders who respond to challenges by exceeding all expectations. The Korthan Dominion gave them 1 year to prepare for war. They delivered ahead of schedule. This species must never be threatened again. He marked the file with the highest security classification and locked it. Then he sat in the darkness of his quarters, watching the holographic display of the galaxy. Half of it still glowed in Korthan crimson, 10,000 years of conquest. But one small system, one yellow star with a blue-green world, remained defiantly independent. And it was growing brighter every day as human industry expanded, as their fleets multiplied, as they transformed from peaceful explorers into something far more dangerous, motivated defenders with an industrial base and a deadline mindset. Vektash had spent his entire life believing in Korthan invincibility. Now he knew better. The greatest military in the galaxy had made one critical mistake. They'd given humanity a deadline, and humanity had delivered.